the FOX6 studios, this is Ask Contact 6, and this is the segment where we bring in experts to answer your questions. Today, our chosen topic is banking issues. That includes credit card disputes, problems with money transfer apps, and fraud, just to name a few of the things that we'll discuss today. We chose this topic because Contact 6 tracks our complaints by type, and so far in 2024, this is the number one type of complaint we've received from consumers. So to answer your questions today, we've brought in Constance Alberts, Director of Bank On Greater Milwaukee. Constance, thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me. This is an awesome topic. So many people struggle with this issue.
Well, thank you for helping us address some of these questions. We got some interesting ones that we'll be discussing today. Before we get started, can you please provide us with some background on what Bank On Greater Milwaukee does?
Well, Bank on Greater Milwaukee is a part of a national coalition. And our goal is really to look at safe and affordable banking access. And sometimes people will, well, what does that mean? That really means looking at accounts that are transparent. It allows you to do everything that other people do, save, direct deposit, security, which is, again, is very important. And these accounts also don't allow you to overdrive. So what that does, it allows you to really manage your money better. But it's not just about having an account, a banking account. It's about being able to access other products and services like small dollar loans, mortgages, car loans, and those kind of things.
And anyone can contact you no matter what their financial status is?
It does not matter. Banking is for everyone. And that's the whole thing, is how do you make it accessible for everyone at whatever stage of life that they're in?
Well, thank you for being here. I'm so glad that you're the one answering our questions today. We are going to get to our viewer questions in just a moment here, but first, I want to say thank you to everyone who took the time to fill out our online form. We're going to get through your questions today, and then toward the end of the segment, we're going to move on to some questions raised by other people who have written to Contact 6 over the years. Those questions are coming from the Contact 6 case files. I do want to say we did paraphrase some questions that were on the longer side, and for clarity, and Constance will do her best to answer your questions today based on the information that we have. But for advice on a specific situation, you may want to call Bank On Greater Milwaukee to discuss your case in more detail. So let's get going. Reading our questions for us is our Contact 6 associate producer, Annette. Annette, what is our first question today?
So our first question comes from Kelly, and she's from South Milwaukee, and this is her question. She says, I'm a victim of a scam on Craigslist. I sent $989 to someone who claimed to be a landlord of a rental property. After reporting the incident to the police, I discovered there was a second victim of the same scam. After submitting the police report and all the documentation that my bank requested of me, they are still saying there is nothing they can do because they only protect against fraud and not scams. How can Kelly recover her $989?
Sadly, this is something we hear about quite a bit at Contact 6. So I think this question boils down to, how do I recover money lost to a Craigslist scam?
That is really something that happens a great deal. It is so easy for us nowadays to move into things that are quick and easy to do. And so with Craigslist, what you may want to actually do is report it to the state attorney general's office. You want to also look at reporting it to the federal trade. And one of the things is that whenever you're buying something or interacting with someone, when they're telling you you have to do it right now, you're going to lose out if you don't do it, that should become a pause to you. Because anytime someone is asking for things right away, that should automatically be a red flag. When you're looking at buying products and services, do a little bit more legwork in regard to where it's coming from, if it's a reputable place, if this management company really does exist. And so one of the issues is that you actually did give authorization for that. And, when you look at that, how did you give the authorization? Did you use your debit card? Did you give them access to your bank account? If you did those things, you definitely want to put an alert on to the credit report. You want to talk to the financial institution that says, how can I make sure that none of my information goes anywhere? In regard to retrieving that money, that's going to be really difficult. You have to be extremely vigilant in really figuring out, I need that police report. and just continue to work with the financial institution in regard to retrieving it. But it may be difficult.
Right. She mentioned the protection against fraud, not scams. And I think that's where that authorization part comes into play, because a scam is something where you fell victim and you took that proactive step to go and withdraw that money and send it to this scammer. And that's harder to retrieve than, let's say, the bank had something compromised.
Right.
That would be fraud.
Absolutely. Because when you look at fraud, it's more of I made a decision and then someone took advantage of me. And so, again, that's why we have to be extremely careful with any transaction, not just a transaction on Craigslist. It could be a transaction with a home improver or a credit card or solicitation saying that I noticed that you have this or that. We just have to be extremely careful about who we give our information to before we give them our money.
When it comes to how an individual gives money to a scammer, does that make a difference when it comes to trying to get your money back? We've heard of people sending things by prepaid gift cards. Maybe they wrote a check. Maybe they sent something by a money transfer app or by credit card. Are there ways to pay that are more secure than others?
I believe sometimes if you really work with your financial institution, maybe a cashier's check, because again, that helps. If you're doing like a gift card, you always want to be really careful. Gift cards have become the one of the biggest ways to scam individuals. You want to make sure that the individual that's getting that money is really the one who should have it. And so I would really think of having more of a relationship with the financial institution, with a
Discuss
check.
it with them too.
Oh, absolutely.
What do you think this sounds like? Does this sound like a scam to you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. And with those gift cards, that money is not, you can't refund that. You can't get that money back if you realize later.
Right. You cannot get that money back. There's so often where individuals are gathering gift cards and recording them and taking the PIN number. And so when you use it, their money is gone immediately.
All right. The same could be said for money transfer apps. That money can be hard to get back as well.
It's really hard when you do peer-to-peer payments. You have to really understand what their policy is in regard to refunds and things like that. But most of us, when we use peer-to-peer, we don't look at the fine print to say, oh, what if this happens? We just like, oh, I can easily sign up for this and I can easily transfer money back and forth. This is the best thing since sliced bread. But again, there's always a cost.
All right. I think we're ready for the next question, Annette. Who do we have next?
Sure. The next one is from May, and she lives in Milwaukee. This is what she writes. I gave my mortgage payment addressed to the mortgage company. I gave it to my mailman. I had purchased the money order from a check cashing store. When my new statement came out, it didn't reflect that my payment was cleared and credited to my statement. As a result, our mortgage amount was doubled and late fees attached. When I reached out to the store, I learned the check was cashed, but the mortgage company never received payment. The store suggested that I reach out to my bank. So May would like to know, what can I do to be reimbursed for the money order that was fraudulently cashed?
Okay. I think that's a pretty straightforward question there. How do I get money back for a fraudulently cashed money order?
Well, one of the things to keep in mind is, where did you get the money order from? Because that is the first place I would start. I would go back to the check cashing place because they're the ones who issued the money order, not your bank. And so I would go back to them and then have them to trace that and put a trace on that.
Which they can do.
They can definitely put a trace on that and identify that it did not go to where it was supposed to. The other question is, was the money order actually filled out? Or did you buy it and leave it blank? If you bought it and left it blank, that's going to be even harder to actually say who it was supposed to go to.
Are money orders generally a safe way to send money?
They are. It just really depends on who you're paying with the money orders. Say, for instance, that you're writing it out, and with the money order itself, you're looking at it's going to the utility company. You always want to figure out, did it actually get there? So we have to be really careful about making sure that our payments are being posted properly and those kind of things. So money orders can be, the only thing about a money order, if you leave it blank, anyone can pick it up. You could drop it, you could misplace it, and anyone can pick it up and actually start using it. So if you're going to use a money order, you really want to make sure that you actually put in the who it's for, the memo section as well, and just use all of those safeguards that are put in place when you're using that to make transactions.
One thing I've learned through our reporting is that it is possible to cancel a money order, but it's a lot easier to do before it's been cashed. So if you realize something went wrong before then, it's a lot easier to cancel it than whether after it's been cashed. But it is still possible. You just may have to pay a fee.
You may have to pay a fee. It's like putting a stop payment on a check. But again, it's so important for us, if we're making a payment to something or someone, we want to make sure that they actually received it. We want to be looking at our mortgage statements, any statements that we have. There's an obligation related to it. We want to make sure that the payment posted on the correct time, because you may have sent it and it may have been late because they didn't get it in time or they didn't post it in time. But then you have that money order that actually indicated when it was sent and when it was mailed. The other thing you could also do if you're sending a money order, I know it can be a little bit more, is to maybe put it in an envelope or a return receipt. So they actually have to sign that they did receive that payment.
Okay, good advice. And I think if people decide to go this route, they can talk to the check cashing place. I think that's an important step, because we have known that those establishments have refunded people in the past, or for money orders that didn't go where they were supposed to. So hopefully that will work out for May. What is our next question, Annette?
Sure. Our next question comes from Larry, and he lives in Kenosha, and this is what he writes to us. My father-in-law's bank was charging him $50 for monthly service fees on his account. He was 65 years old and a World War II veteran when he opened the bank account, and he kept a large balance in the account. My wife and I believe he was wrongfully charged for these fees, and when my wife became power of attorney, we brought this to the attention of a bank representative, and then going forward, the service fees were dropped. Larry continues to say, my father-in-law passed away approximately 5 years ago, and it continues to bother me that he was charged these fees for so many years. Is it reasonable to request reimbursement for the fees that Larry's father-in-law was charged?
So the question there being, can I get a refund for my dad's disputed bank account fees?
So one of the things to keep in mind whenever we have a dispute about something, we want to act quickly. The sooner we act, the more likely that we'll get the outcome that we're looking for. Unfortunately, 5 years is a long time to come back with a dispute. One of the other things we always want to do is to really look at our bank statements, because our bank statements are going to show us if there's fees being assessed. Sometimes the situation in regard to the banking changes. The amount of money may not necessarily be the same amount that would not allow a fee. Most financial institutions have different services and products that would reduce fees or eliminate fees, either based on the balance, or sometimes even if you're 65 or older, they may have a program. So it really is important to stay on top of our banking relationship, just to make sure that we are really getting the best product and service that we could have with that financial institution.
So if people notice new fees at their bank, would you encourage them to ask about them?
Oh, absolutely. Anytime there's something that you are not aware of, that you did not agree to, you want to immediately say, is there a way that I can get a refund for this? Is there a different account that you have that would better meet my needs? Absolutely.
All right. But in Larry's case, perhaps that 5 years is just too much time.
I think that's too much time. I'm really glad they were able to identify that in moving forward, because as he said, when they were identified it and moving forward, they didn't have those fees and obligations anymore.
All right. I hope that was helpful, Larry. Annette is our next question from Diane.
Yes, it is. And she lives in Elkhorn, and this is what she writes to us. My bank decided that it would no longer provide safe deposit box services as of February 2023. I had a complimentary safe deposit box for many years. In February, I turned in the keys as requested and was presented with my safe deposit box. It was empty. The box appeared to have been drilled out. The contents of the box included important documents, wedding rings, and a commemorative coin. I was beyond shocked and tried without success to work with the bank manager to figure out what happened to the contents of my box. It's been more than a year, and I want the contents of the safe deposit box returned to me. What are my options?
So, in summary, how do I get missing items from my safe deposit box returned?
Well, one of the things she can definitely do is contact the Wisconsin Department of Revenue and actually send them a first class mail with that information. Usually, if there is something that is unclaimed, and in this case, they would consider this unclaimed, you can contact them and then they would do the investigation in regard to where that property is.
That's good to know. So, for people who aren't familiar with what safe deposit boxes are, there's often a room in the bank filled with these boxes. You'll have a key, the bank has a key, and usually you both have to turn them at the same time to open the box. It's pretty unusual to go in and find that your box has been drilled out or your contents are missing, but we have reported on it before for Contact 6. And one thing we learned is that safe deposit boxes are not insured by the FDIC like a savings account or a checking account is, which means that the bank is not liable because it doesn't know what's in the box, although you should probably review what your contract says. If there's negligence involved, you're more likely to get a refund, but that can be hard to prove. So are these generally safe, using safe deposit boxes?
Absolutely. And we all do that though, because we want a safe place to have our valuables, even our cash. We want a safe place to have that. But I do agree with you. It's really important to read the contract. And it's also important to make sure that the financial institution knows if your address changed or anything like that, because by law, they do have to send you information that says there's going to be a change in the way we do our policy.
All right. And for Diane, I might recommend she fill out a Contact 6 complaint form because we have had success at least one other time helping someone get contents of a safe deposit box returned. Annette, what do we have next?
This one comes from Ben. He lives in Big Bend, and he would like to know, when an ATM doesn't give you all of your, what can you do when an ATM doesn't give you all of your money? For example, the bank says you withdrew $240, but you only received $100. Then when you file a dispute and the bank says the ATM gave you $240. So in this situation, do you have any options, or are you simply out the $140?
So, what can I do about an ATM dispensing the wrong amount of money?
That is so bizarre to me.
We've actually heard about that three
couple
or four
times.
times. Yeah.
Really. And so you can actually request a financial audit. And anytime you request an audit, they have to provide you the information relating to the outcome of that audit. So I would go back to that financial institution and say, I really do need to have an audit done to really tell me what happened. Because what I found out is that the financial institution, when an ATM disperses money, it actually counts the dollar amount, the bills that were actually dispersed. So he needs to go to them and ask and request a financial audit.
I also think it's a good idea to file a complaint. Let the bank know that it
there's
happened.
an issue. Absolutely. Because he may not have been the only person. How often do you just get the money and you just drive off? You put it in your wallet, your purse, your car, and you just drive off, not really counting it. And so the other thing too, if the financial institution was open, he could have probably went in and said, my receipt says something different than what I actually did receive.
Right. And then the bank knows something's wrong and they can identify a problem. And maybe they'll say, actually, we've been having issues
Yes.
with that ATM.
Absolutely.
Well, it sounds like I'm sorry that happened to you, Ben. I hope you can get it worked out. Our next question, Annette, what's that one?
This comes from Chris in Menominee Falls, and this is what they wrote. While vacationing in Mexico, fake cops pulled me over for driving through stop signs in a roundabout and charged my credit card $600. I contacted my credit card company about the scam. They said since I improved the transaction, they won't reverse it. Is there no protection against these scammers?
So to summarize Chris's question, how do I get a refund from my credit card company for a fake cop scam?
That is a hard one.
Yeah.
And it's a hard one because you authorize the transaction. And that's really the thing that we're finding when there's fraud and a scam, is that individuals are authorizing the transaction. And so it's, again, very important to report it immediately. and see if there's some recourse along those lines. And also keep in mind the fact that you gave them your credit card information. You want to monitor your credit report to make sure that there's no other additional transactions that's happening on your card because they did get your information. So again, really having that knowledge is going to be so important, but there may be an issue with him being able to receive his funds back.
No, he mentioned a credit card company. Typically, they have more protections built in, right, than other types of payments?
They they typically do, and so again, it really will depend on how quickly he reported the information, what documentation. It's the same process. You still need to file a police report that there was a fraud or scam, so you still need to follow those same procedures.
All right. Now, our next question, Annette, is it from LaCherie?
Yes, and she lives in Milwaukee, and she would like to know the answer to this question. So, what's the easiest and quickest way to get a divorce in Wisconsin when married in Chicago? She says, I can't really afford a lawyer and everything that comes behind it.
Now, I don't think we can help her with all of the aspects of this question, but I do think we can ask one of the underlying issues, which is how can I afford to get a divorce? What should people know about preparing their finances for that kind of separation?
Yeah, I'm really sorry that it's happened. So when you're looking at a divorce, a separation, you really want to look at those joint obligations that you both have. That could be rent, that could be mortgage, that could be utilities, that could be a loan, that could be health insurance. So you really want to take a look at what or how you're going to be affected. Do you now have to get health insurance on your own? Are you going to be able to afford to live in the same place that you're currently living? When you get ready to do your taxes, how does that affect you now maybe filing jointly, still married, or what the situation is? If you have your spouse as the beneficiary on your life insurance policy, what does that look like? Do you have any other obligations that you are jointly related to paying? And so you really want to figure out, what does my financial situation look like now, and how is it going to be impacted now that I am the only person who is responsible for my obligations?
That sounds like a lot.
It is a lot. And so again, when there's a change in our life situation, we want to kind of step back and really review it, because it can be very overwhelming, especially if you've been in a situation where there's been that joint obligation. So you really want to take some time, and you may not want to necessarily make any additional major decisions until you're able to really get a handle of this particular situation.
So how do you even start? Do you call all those places individually? Do you meet with a financial counselor?
I think it's important to meet with a financial counselor. I think it's also important to know what obligations are there, because sometimes you have a situation where only one person pays the bills. And so if you are both jointly obligated to it, you really need to know what that looks like. You want to pull your credit report, because if you did things jointly, you want to see what's out there. And that can also be something that you can negotiate during the divorce settlement. How does it affect the kids? Is there alimony or child support? What does all of that look like for you now?
Are there special circumstances for things like insurance if you need to get off someone's plan and get your own? If you're not at the end of that time period?
Yeah, absolutely. So those are called special circumstances, where in most cases you can contact your HR and say, I have a special circumstance. There may be a birth of a child, there may be a divorce, or there may be a death or something like that. Now I need my own coverage. And in most cases, you're able to get your own coverage, and you don't have to wait for open enrollment.
Okay, so could someone come to Bank on Greater Milwaukee with all their documents and say, help me figure this out?
They can definitely give me a call. We do have partners that we work with in our coalition. Riverworks Financial Clinic is one of our partners that they would be able to sit down with someone and just look at the overview, because it's important for someone else to help you, especially if this is not something that you've been usually doing yourself in regard to paying obligations.
Right. All right. I hope that was helpful to her as well. Annette, I think our next question is from Alicia.
And she's from Milwaukee. So she tells us she canceled a credit card, and before canceling, she asked the exact amount that was owed. The amount was paid, but then a $17 amount owed was put on her credit report, resulting in a 12-point drop in her score. What can she do?
I know people get really upset about issues that affect their credit score because so many people work so hard to have a good number. What can you do about a credit card dispute that hurts someone's credit score?
Well, a couple things. Sometimes we think that if we pay off or close an account, and paying off and closing an account are two different things. That if we pay off an account and close an account, it's going to affect us positively. It does not always do that. And so, what I would always suggest to individuals is to really look at your history, because the items on your credit report and your score, a big portion of that is based on history. And that means how long have you had that account? So, it's a good idea to pay off debt. That's awesome. To get that one less thing that you have to worry about is to pay it off. But you don't always have to close it, because when you close it, you may be closing the history on it. So you may have had that card for 9 years, and the cards that you have currently are 2 years. So now you went from a 9 year history to a 2 year history, which affects the score. When we are calling in and trying to find out what do I owe, you're asking two separate questions. You're asking what is the balance, and then you're also asking what is due, because the balance and what are due are two different things. And the third question you should ask is, how long is this balance good for? Because if you don't pay it within a certain amount of time, it will generate a fee. And so you definitely want to look at that. And then finally, if you do pay off something, you want to look at that statement to make sure it's been posted. Now, that all sounds kind of negative, but I've got good news. So the fact that you've paid that off, it will not take a very long time for your score to pop back up. So it's just a matter of time that you continue to keep everything current, pay everything on time. That score will come back up.
Yeah, I hate for Alicia that $17 caused such havoc for her with her credit score. So you would recommend just pay that and just take care of it.
Just pay that. But I would also ask her to contact the credit card company and say, I've never been late before. This is really impacting me. And ask them if they would remove it.
Right. Now, do you have any general advice while we're talking about credit scores? You know, good things people can do, bad things people can do for their credit score. I would love some overall advice.
So overall, I would say pay your bills on time and look at your limit and your utilization. And so this is what I mean. Let's say, for instance, real easy math, that your limit is $1,000. You probably should not use more than 30% of that at any given time, because a couple things happen. Your credit score, one of the two biggest impacts is your payment history and your credit utilization. So let's say that you pay everything on time every single month, you never miss a payment, but your utilization is so close to what you actually owe. So you have, again, $1,000. Let's say that you owe 900. You've actually used 90% of that, which affects your score, even though you've never missed a payment. So again, really look at that utilization. Pay everything on time. I'm almost going to say, even if the minimum payment is $25, pay more, because again, you really want to get it under that 30%. And so continue to pay everything on time. Look at how much debt you actually do have. And then if you're going to apply for credit, apply for something that you need as opposed to something that you want. Because sometimes we can go into a store and they'll say, well, if you apply for this credit, we'll give you 20% off on your purchase. It's 20% off. You're going to hit my credit score. I may not get it. And then the other thing is that it's brand new credit. Whenever you receive brand new credit, it does impact your score, because credit is based on history. So if you have a short amount of time period with credit, it's going to impact the score. The longer you pay something on time, it's going to improve your credit score.
Does it matter how many different cards you have? Is it good to limit to a certain number?
Again, I would say, use credit cards in a need base. And, just because they offer you another, I'm not going to name a credit card, but if they offer you another one, like, oh my God, I can use my mileage on this one. I can get rewards on this one. Just really think about, is this something that I need and how can I manage it? And that's the thing. When you have a lot of credit obligations, sometimes it becomes difficult to manage it. And so you really are looking at having a mixture, maybe having one or two credit cards, maybe having a revolving, which is revolving, or maybe having a loan. But do we really need 5 particular credit cards in the same name? And then also think about, what does that do for the impact? Now I have to make sure I keep 30% all the time. Sometimes we get credit because they're saying, well, if you get this and pay it off within 18 months, there's no interest. Well, you have to really be on top of that to get that paid off so that you're not charged that interest. So just be really cautious in regard to credit card solicitations. What do I really need it? And sometimes we do stuff because we want to. I understand that. But again, we just want to keep it in perspective because most of us have financial goals, and having a lot of debt really hampers our ability to reach those goals.
All right. That was a good question. I'm glad someone asked us a question about credit scores. Annette, who do we have next?
This one comes from Ramini in Waukesha. She tells us she would like to transfer $150,000 to an Indian bank. She tells us she's 71 years old and very sick, and she needs to get alternative medication and treatment, but she has to stay there for several months. She would like some guidance on what to do. She's alone here in the United States, and her family's in India.
So Ramini is asking, how do I transfer money to a bank account in a different country? What do you think about this question?
Well, financial institutions have the ability to do a wire transfer. The only thing, when you do a wire transfer, it's immediate and it's very, very difficult to reverse. And so once you make that transaction, you're probably not going to be able to get that money back. But in particular to their question, in this situation, you always just want to be careful that you don't take all of your funds and put it in a situation where you really can't access it as quickly as you need to. And so for this particular individual, I would suggest maybe looking at keeping some of their funds here in the States, and then looking at making monthly payments or obligation payments instead of just taking all of their money. So still continue to have the majority of your assets here instead of transferring everything, because a wire transfer is pretty much a final thing.
So step one would be going to your bank, and I'm assuming your bank could help you make those arrangements?
Financial institutions definitely do have the ability to do wire transfer. When it's out of the country, the fee may be a little bit more. Typically, the fee could be between $25 and $50 to do a wire transfer. They do ask a lot of questions. They want to know where it's going, who is it going to, the amount. They need to verify all of that information before they transfer any funds. So it's going to be a variety of questions that they're going to ask any individual in regard to a wire transfer.
If this person is moving to another country for who knows how long, do they have to transfer their money to a bank in that country, or is it possible to still use their bank here?
I believe it's possible, but again, it's going to depend on if it's a financial institution that has a big footprint. If they have access to that financial institution in that country. So again, it really does depend. Most small community banks may not have that big footprint. Most credit unions are not going to have that big footprint. So that's the other thing too. They may want to consider, if there's a financial institution in the place that they're moving to, they may want to open a small account with a financial institution here that has a relationship with a financial institution there, so they can easily access their money without additional fees.
Right. Ramini said that they're 71 years old, and I have to wonder, I don't want to generalize, but it seem like they'd be more likely to prefer an in-person bank rather than doing it over
absolutely.
the phone.
I just always think is in person is so much better, because it actually gives you that opportunity to ask more questions. Sometimes when we are over the phone or doing an email, we're less likely to ask those questions. But then the other thing too, financial institutions are really good at asking questions that maybe the consumer had not thought about. And so this would definitely be an opportunity for that.
All right. Thank you for that question, Ramini. We're going to move on to some questions that we've pulled from our Contact 6 case files over the years. Annette, what do we have next?
Sure, this is the first one. So, Contact 6 often hears about stolen checks and money orders, and often these checks were placed in blue collection boxes, then stolen and washed by criminals. People tell us the names on the checks were changed before the checks were cashed. So, a couple questions. How can these people pursue refunds for their stolen money, and how can they prevent becoming victims?
Right. So, how can people get refunds for stolen checks and money orders? We've been hearing about this a lot.
Yeah, definitely. It's always going to be starting with the authorities, looking at filing a police report, contacting the financial institution. But then you want to take it a step further. You actually want to file a complaint with the United States Postal Service. You want to file possibly a complaint with our state attorney's office, because this mail fraud and taking money out of the blue boxes or envelopes out of the blue boxes have just increased drastically. And so one of the things that they talk about doing is, if at all possible, not to put mail, especially checks or money orders or bills, in the blue boxes anymore, which is, I grew up with the blue boxes.
Yeah.
So, pulling up to the blue box and dropping everything in because you couldn't make it to the post office.
Right.
So again, I think when you look at prevention, it's actually going into the post office and hand delivering it, because unfortunately, individuals have become very savvy in being able to unlock those boxes and just go through mail. And so it's really important, if at all possible, to use the post office service or use a P.O. box or something along those lines. And then when you're writing a check, to try to prevent anyone from washing out your information, maybe use maybe a gel pen.
Those are harder for certain types of scammers to erase.
Or a ballpoint pen or something along those lines. But then also maybe think about doing bill pay. Most financial institutions have bill pay that you can pay directly from your account directly to that obligation. So those are some things to definitely think about.
Yeah, I know when they send a money order, as we talked about before, it is possible to get that money back if the place tracks it. The check cashing store tracks it. You might have to pay a fee
Right.
to do so. Stolen checks, is that a little harder because it came from the bank?
Well, stolen checks, again, because you have that relationship with the financial institution, you can contact them right away and say, here, this is what I noticed. That's why, again, it's so important to monitor not only your bank statements, but your obligation statements as well, so that you're really staying on top of how your bills are being processed and how they're being paid. So that's extremely important. And even if you're going to a check cashing place to do money orders, would it be better to have a relationship with a financial institution so that you have that level of security? If you continue to use a check cashing place, find out what their guidelines are on and processes on getting a refund or stopping a payment. Find that information out before you go ahead and make that transaction.
All right, we hate to hear about those cases, but unfortunately, we continue to hear about them. And Annette, what's our next question from the case files?
Sure. So a man wrote to Contact 6 about his deceased wife's pension plan. She died from cancer after making her husband her plan's primary beneficiary. 7 years after the wife's death, her company filed for bankruptcy and could no longer meet its pension obligations. The pension went to the Pension Benefit Guarantee Corporation, which is an arm of the government that issues private sector pension plans. The question is, how can people track lost pension plans? And if a company goes bankrupt, is it likely its pension obligations will be met?
So for this person, I guess the question would be, how do you track down a missing pension plan? Do you hear about this sometimes? People say, hey, I feel like I have some money somewhere and I don't know where it went.
Yeah, sometimes we do. And some of the things that you definitely want to do is look and contact your plan administrator, because they have a summary of description and detail about the plan itself. And some of the plans are covered. You can actually go onto it's called the Pension Benefit Guaranty Corporation,
PBGC.
and really look, and you can actually see what's available and see if the funds were secured or not. But you want to start with that plan description, and it will let you know if those funds were insured or not. But that's how you would be able to identify if you've got money out there that you did not know about.
Yeah, and if a company goes bankrupt, I don't think you are guaranteed to your entire pension in that case. They might have to make some other arrangement.
Right, unless it was a guarantee or insured. And that's why you would go to the benefit and really look to see if that particular plan was guaranteed or insured.
Do sometimes people need help tracking down 401ks
Oh,
as well?
absolutely. 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 So again, always start with the plan administrator and look at the plan description. And then in most cases, we can either contact Wisconsin Department of Financial Institution or the Insurance Department, Wisconsin Insurance Department Commission, and get some additional assistance from them as well.
Do you have any advice for people for keeping track of those things?
Well, I would say a safe deposit box, but I would say
Usually
that
they're fine.
They're usually fine, or maybe even have a small safe that you have, and just keep all your important papers in that and review them on a regular basis. I always suggest to people that at the end of each year, we do a financial checkup and kind of look at where we are with our finances, with our 401ks, with our pensions, with our obligations, with our insurance, and just do a checkup every year to see where we are.
Do you recommend people have a certain amount saved for when they retire?
It just depends on where you are. What I would recommend that if you know that you're going to be retiring, most of us who are at that stage or that season in life, we want to make sure that we don't have a large amount of obligations because our income is going to be different. Look and see how close you are to paying off your home and your vehicle. Look in regard to your medical coverage and things like that. So really do a checkup on where you are financially if you've got some time before you're going to retire.
All right. Thank you for your answers to that question. Annette, what do we have next?
So, a man wrote to Contact 6 after waiting more than a year for the approval of a workers' compensation claim. He tore his rotator cuff after falling off a vehicle on the job. The claims adjuster told the man he needed more documentation. His doctor insisted the documentation was already sent. Can you tell us what is the reasonable amount of time to wait for the approval of a workers' compensation claim? And where can someone turn for help with speeding up the approval process?
So, what is the reasonable amount of time to wait for approval of a workers' compensation claim? How long can that take?
It could take a long time.
Yeah.
So there's no reasonable time. It's really important, even though he's saying that the physician submitted all the information. He probably did submit the information, but they're requesting it again. I always suggest that when information is sent to a different party is that I'm CC'd on it so that I have the time frame and the documentation myself to say, okay, this was sent such and such time. The other thing too is if a person has been denied or they're waiting, they can still appeal that decision. Unfortunately, when you're looking for workman's comp to pay things, you've got bills that are coming up, and it makes you extremely anxious. And because landlords, mortgage companies, utilities, they still want to be paid.
Right.
And so I think what he's doing is really reaching out and saying, what else can I do? Continue to provide them all of the information that they're asking for. If it's being denied or held up, reach out to whoever their contact person is at Workman's Comp and say, so what is really going on? What additional information do I need? And just continue to work that process. And it's not a great answer, but it's the only answer that you just have to continue to work that process.
Right. And be prepared to spend some time on hold
Oh,
the phone.
Yeah, you will be on hold.
Do you hear about that complaint with other types of benefits, disability, unemployment, and so on?
Oh, absolutely. Because again, this is not something that the person does. So the person on the other end is saying, give us A through Z. And this is not the person who's asking for the service, this is not what they're this is not their job. And so now you're asking me to provide you all this additional information. I have to figure out where the information is. And sometimes it's difficult to even provide them the information. I may not have access to a fax machine. I may not know how to upload the information. And so again, you have this learning curve for people. I may not be able to get to the physician. The physician may take longer than they're supposed to. So again, it's really a challenging situation when you're trying to get benefits and you're in need of those benefits. And so when you're requested to get information, you just want to confirm that you understand exactly what they're asking for, because sometimes words and wording is so different and you may not understand. You may think it's one thing and it can be something different. So getting clarification is extremely important.
Yeah, and I would add, make sure you fill out that form correctly the first time, because one little mistake can really slow down the process.
Or have someone help you who this is what they do. You know, if it's possible to go in and sit down with someone to help you fill that out. And
Who would do that?
And it's, well, the disability and Social Security, they do have people, but they also have, in most cases, they have a tutorial. Again,
Online.
online.
Sure. Yeah, sure. But that's better than nothing.
Absolutely.
All right. Let's see. Are we on our last question, Annette?
We have a couple more.
Couple more. Okay.
Yep. So Contact 6 often hears from people with complaints about money transfer apps. Many of these people use the apps for most of their banking, if not all of their banking. Some say their money was wrongfully withdrawn or accounts frozen for suspected fraud. We hear about money transfers that never went through or scam transfers that people want to reverse. Many tell us communication with the money transfer apps is difficult and in some cases almost impossible. So could you tell us what are some of the positive and negatives of using money transfer apps? And is it okay for people to rely on these apps for all banking instead of having an account at a local bank that they can visit when a problem arises?
All right. So positives and negatives of using these peer-to-peer transfer apps for most of your banking.
And so one of the things I will say off the bank is that, use the word bank, is that these apps are not banks. And I think that's a misconception, that these are financial institutions and that they have the same regulations that a brick and mortar or a traditional financial institution would have.
And why is that important to know?
And so it's important to know because financial institutions, banks and credit unions, they are insured. Their individual accounts are insured up to $250,000. So if a financial institution was to go belly up, that individual's money is still secure. If a place like Cash App was to go belly up, they're a business. So there is a possibility that those funds may not be secure. And so again, that's why it's so important not to necessarily rely upon that as the means of doing financial transactions. And so when you look at that, peer-to-peer had become so easy, especially during the pandemic, because now we can pay our bills, we can send money to people for a variety of different reasons. But what we found is that frauds and scams became rampant because we can pretend to be someone that we're not. If you give me, for instance, I had a young lady who, one of her friends said, I really want this item, and the person contacted them on Facebook. And she thought it was her friend. And she said, I really want this item. Can you help me? And I'll pay you back. And so she gave her Apple Pay information to her friend, who she thought was her friend.
Right.
It wasn't her friend. The person was able to contact Apple Pay and say, oh, I forgot my code. And because she had just enough information, she was able to get that person's code and do all of those transactions. When the original person went to Apple Pay and said, well, this is fraudulent, they said, well, you gave them access. And so it's always about giving individual access to your information. When you hold all of your funds, I had a young man who his paycheck was direct deposit. And so they tried to pull money
Onto a peer transfer app?
Yes.
Okay.
And so he had all his paycheck which was about 3 months of money, about $5,000. So he initially saw that someone had tried to do a penny. It initially started with him buying something online. So he just assumed that it was the company. They tried to do a penny, the penny went through. The next day, they tried to do a dollar went through. And over a week's time period, they completely wiped out his entire money in those accounts. So then he had to contact Cash App and say, what do I do? And so it can be a very long, drawn out process to get feedback, refund, and acknowledgement. So the benefit is it's quick, it's easy. The negative is that it's quick and it's easy. So to really combat that, you probably would be good to have both, maybe a peer-to-peer and a relationship with a financial institution where you do the majority of your paying bills and those type of transactions. Definitely, if you're going to keep money, keep your money in a secure place, which is a financial institution, as opposed to having it on a cash card. People have Cash App cards. I don't know how many times that individuals have lost Cash App cards. And so the other thing too is when you're looking at having peer to peer, you really want to be careful about the information you're providing. A lot of people provide a very detailed information on Facebook. They will tell you what their favorite color is. They will tell you where they just went to
Right.
eat. They'll tell you what their favorite kid's name is.
Sure.
And those are all things that people are looking so that they can mirror being you.
Answer your security questions.
Yes.
Right.
So you have to be really careful.
Are there some people that are using these apps because they think maybe they have a bad history with credit cards or banking and they think I can't get a decent bank account?
I think people are using it because it's convenient. No one's asking me any questions. Sometimes you have individuals who've never had a relationship with a financial institution. They've grown up in the era of peer to peer. So this is what they use. And you're right. Sometimes individuals may think, well, I can't get an account. And so that's one of the major things with Banco on Greater Milwaukee is that we look at accessibility. If you've had some problems, let's have a conversation and see what's the best product and service for you. Because again, what we found is that when you have a bank account, you're going to spend less in fees over your lifetime. It's been proven that over a lifetime, people can spend over $40,000 in fees over their lifetime because they don't have access to a safe and a secure bank account.
Are there still a number of people in Milwaukee without bank accounts who are quote unquote unbanked?
We have a very large number of people who not only are unbanked, but they're underbanked. And the underbanked can be the individuals that are using peer-to-peer and they have a bank account. So I have a bank account, but I'm taking all of my money out. I'm buying a money order because I'm not using bill pay. Actually, doing transactions because I'm not really having a relationship with a financial institution. And so again, that's why we work with our partners to say, let's let people know that this is available. Unfortunately, most people are not going to look at a bank account unless there's a reason for it. I'm starting a new job. I'm moving to a new place. I'm trying to get a particular benefit. And so that's why we work a lot with our community partners for that front to front facing so that we can actually say these are available to anyone. It doesn't matter if you've had an issue in the past. Let's talk about it because again, education is so important. But when you have a relationship with someone, you're more likely to have that conversation that you wouldn't have with someone you don't know or you don't trust.
All right. And now we are on to our very last question.
Yep,
What do we
This
have?
is the last one. So, a man wrote to Contact Six after walking into a check cashing business and getting a loan. It was for 21 monthly payments at an APR of 130%. His $1,700 loan would cost him $4,700 by the time all payments were made. He regretted the loan and wanted a lower interest rate. What are his options and is this legal?
So, is an installment loan with an APR of 130% legal in Wisconsin?
Yes, it is legal. And the reason that it's legal is because it is actually spelled out in the contract before you sign it. And that makes it a legal binding agreement. And so one of the things we always suggest is that if an individual knows that they may need a loan, some financial institutions have what's called small dollar loans to really combat the fact that a person is paying 130%. In most cases, small dollar loans are not any more than 25% interest, which is high.
Yeah.
But again, it's a loan that there's no security attached to it. And so whenever you have a loan that doesn't have security, you're going to pay more for it. In regard to him being able to get out of it. If he has a relationship with a financial institution, I would have that conversation. But always keep in mind that one of the laws that says in regard to loans, they have to spell out what it's going to cost you. When we're in a crisis situation, we tend to take what we can get because we need it right away. And so when that happens, let's try to figure out, is there a better way to get those funds? Is there something else that I can do in regard to obtaining those funds? Because it's difficult when we're paying so much, which really turns into such a small amount.
Is there a way to get an APR lowered after you sign that contract?
No,
No.
because you signed the contract. And that means that you read the contract. And that's the other thing too. We have to start reading the contract, but I think some things that happen is that we don't understand what we're reading.
Right.
We don't know that this really means that amount. And the other thing is sometimes when you have a contract like that, even if you pay it off early, you're still going to pay that finance fee because it's an upfront fee. And so that's the other thing you want to know is there a penalty if I pay this up sooner? And if you find that there's a penalty, that definitely may not be the obligation you want to have, because you can take it out on Monday and you pay it on Friday, you still end up paying the full amount. It really did not benefit you at all.
I know questions with situations like this often happen in haste, but is there any step someone should try before they go the installment loan route?
Oh, absolutely. Go to your financial institution. Most financials have small dollar loans that they're able to help people with. Credit unions are really good. They have loans, especially if you've been in relationship with them. So again, that's why it's so important to be in relationship, not just with a credit union, but any financial institution, and know what products and services that they have. I always tell people, when you go in, do it like you're dating. Ask all the questions, because when you're dating, you're supposed to ask every single thing. And so in your banking relationship, ask all of those questions. I'm thinking about being a business owner. I may need a car. I want to be a homeowner. I want to go off to school. I'm thinking about retirement. So ask all of those questions to see if that financial institution is a good fit for you.
Well, thank you for handling all the questions we threw at you today. I know we had a wide range of subjects, so thank you to everyone who submitted a question. That is actually all the time we have for today. If you would like to submit a question for a future Ask Contact 6 segment, you can use the QR code that we will have on the screen, or you can go to fox6now.com and click on the blue Ask Contact 6 button. Constance, thank you so much for being here today.
This has been awesome. Thank you so much.
We'll have to do it again sometime. Thanks also to the people who made this recording possible, including our executive producer, Sarah Smith, our editor, Dave Majuda, chief photojournalist, Cale Zimney, who is working the video switcher today. I'm Jenna Sachs. Thanks for joining us.